I will have, say, three parts in the presentation. Number one, a look at the size of the budget and give a few figures, including the public debt. And secondly, a look at some relevant macroeconomic indicators. And the third part will be devoted to comments on the positive before looking at the negative. So the budget size, it's equal to 133.8 billion. 133.8 billion rupees, which is up by 14% on last year, on the year which is being completed, which is 122.3. That's for the expenditure, 133.8, and the revenue, which is estimated by government, is equal to 117.4, leaving a deficit of 16.4 billion, equal to 3.2%, and this 3.2% is also what is estimated by 30th June of this year. 3.2% of GDP, and GDP for next year is expected to go beyond 500 billion. It's going to be 512.2 billion rupees as compared to this year, which is at 476.3. All this is with a growth rate which is expected to be 4.1 next year. This year, 3.9. Since the beginning of the year, we have heard a lot about this going to be 4% this year, but it's not. It's 3.9, and now expecting 4.1 next year. The expenditure and the revenue, a bit more details about this. The revenue, as you know very well, is largely made up of taxes. The recurrent revenue, I mean, made up of taxes. Out of 106.94 revenue, recurrent, 106.94, the taxes are 99.72, not to say 100 billion. And this 99.72 of taxes represented by income tax, I will leave the decimals. Income tax 27 billion, goods and services, that is on particularly the indirect taxes, 64, including VAT in there, and some other things. So the things to remember: income tax 27 billion, indirect taxes 64 billion. Now there is, as regards the recurrent expenditure, it's expected to be 116 billion. The largest amount goes to social benefits and subsidies, 33.5 billion, followed by salaries of a public service, 31.4. Interest has its share in it, interest on the public debt, 13.38. And quite a large amount goes to local authorities and parastatals, 22 billion. Overall, expenditure recurrent is expected to be 116, that is 8.7% more than last year. As regards the capital budget, well, perhaps good to have a look at what was the estimate, the original estimate for this year, 18.8 billion, 18.8 billion of expenditure, but it's going to be, they tell us now, at 15.7. And as regards revenue, they are expecting revenue against the 15.7 of only 8.15 billion. That's for 17-18, and for 18-19, expenditure will go up to 17.89 and revenue 10.5. So all in all, finally, taking recurrent and capital together, we end up with an estimated 3.2% deficit equal to 16.4 billion rupees. So that's for the budget. Perhaps also I should mention that education, some of these social ministries, education goes for 17 billion, health 12 billion, and social security as a whole, pensions, subsidies and all that, 24.6 billion. And public service pensions, 8.87. So this is briefly, therefore, the budget as I see it, and perhaps we can go have a quicker, closer look at the large projects. For next year. Obviously, the Metro Express, 4.8 billion as compared to 3.4 in this particular year, 4.8 next year. The sports complex at Côte d'Or, 2.2 billion. And then the SMP parks, 150 million. The Bagatelle Dam and the water treatment, all taken together, quite a large, still a large amount, 578 million. And quite surprisingly, local authorities, 400 million of capital projects. 400 million, and the minister did mention in his speech that he is going to upgrade the amenities in the towns, and I've seen somewhere in the press that the mayor of Port-Louis is congratulating himself for having done some of this work, and the mayor of Rosehill also is on the same trend. So let's hope we have nicer towns afterwards. 400 million rupees. Tourism likes that. Another large amount, water services, 2 billion. 2.09 billion. Water is free, or almost. Social housing, 1.6 billion. And road construction, as you would imagine, nearly 3 billion. And then the ocean economy, which has been mentioned at last in the budget, there is going to be a geotechnical study, only, or not just only, 40 million this year apparently, and 49 million for fisheries. But this is what they say they are spending. Are we seeing the results? I don't know. And next year, 17.9 for the ocean economy and 77.6 for fisheries. Let us hope we get some, really some work done on this resource of 2.3 or 2.6 square million kilometers, which was, because I think this is really a resource which we are not using and which is the one which can help us to go higher in the scale of countries according to their revenue. So that was the first part, and I am not finished with the first part, with the public debt. The public debt is equal to 63.4 billion at the end, is estimated at 63.4 billion at the end of this year, and next year almost the same amount, 63.1, and it is said in the budget figures that by 2021 we will have gone to 60 billion. This public debt comprises central government debt, 53.9 by 2021, and public enterprises, 6.2. You all know there has been a lot of talk about these loans, public debt being sort of incurred through other institutions. But there we are told that the public debt will be 60.1 at the end of 2021. But I have come across a paragraph, if I can find it again on my computer. Sorry, no, forget it. I just quote out of memory. No, c'est pas là. It's a paragraph which is not in the budget speech, but it is in the macroeconomic indicators section, and where they talk of the national debt. They talk of the national debt. Before I saw that, I was going to raise the point here. In the past, we used to talk about public debt and national debt. But this thing sort of disappeared. Now I see a small paragraph in an apologetic tone, sort of, a bit apologetic, telling us that this external debt, national level, is expected to increase from 15.6% to 17.2%. That's the servicing. And the servicing rise from 37 to 42%, and they say that external debt cover in terms of foreign exchange reserves will be at around 260%, and debt service ratio 5%. This is a sort of, it seems to me that this paragraph is meant to cover the debts, the public debt, which has been incurred through SBM and perhaps tomorrow through Mauritius Telecom, from what we have heard or what we have seen. But I am afraid what I don't like very much about this is you go from public debt to national debt, but you are not really told what it is, and therefore there is some lack of transparency there, unfortunately. So much for the budget. Now, rapidly, a look at some macroeconomic indicators. We all know that whatever we do, finally, what we need is foreign exchange to be able to buy our imports. That's why I say that it is very important to have exports. There's no way out of it. So the deficit on the current balance, there is a balance of payments, and as you know, the balance of payments has two parts. The upper part, as I call it, is goods and services, import-export, and then the lower part is the capital and financing part. So a terribly important figure is the deficit between exports and imports, expressed as a percentage of GDP. In this particular year, it's 5.5%. Next year, it's expected to go down to 4.8%, but in the following year, it's going to go up to 8.5%. The reason being given is that there will be purchases of aircrafts in that year. Whatever happens, the thing is we have to be very careful about the deficit on the external sector, not forgetting that in 1979, when we went to IMF, we had only 15 days worth of foreign exchange to buy our imports. We are not there, fortunately, but we have to be careful about this metric. Some of the indicators, the unemployment, 7.1%. This has been more or less stable over the last 2 or 3 years. Not forgetting, it's good, but it's not much higher. But let us not forget that unemployment is calculated by the number of people in the workforce minus the number employed. So unemployment can also go down if a number of people in the workforce goes down. And the number of people in the workforce is going down and will continue to be going down because our demographics indicate that we are a population on a reducing scale, which is terribly important for the future. Who is going to help us to develop that country? This is an important matter. It has not really been covered in the budget. As regards the unemployment, 7%, yes, but for women it's 10.7% in 2017. For men, 4.8%, and the very bad figure, which has been going on for some time, the youth, 24.9%. This may explain why this budget, as in previous years, devotes some paragraphs to employment of the youth. The investment ratio is going to be I don't have the 18 figures, but in 2017, 17.5% as compared to 13.6. No, sorry, 13%, 13.2 in 17 and 12.8 in 16. FDI, which is an important figure for us, has increased in 17 to 17.5 as opposed to 13.6. I was saying we have to export. To be able to export, we must be competitive. To be competitive, we must have productivity. And the metric for productivity in 17 compared to 16 is not so good. Labor productivity, which had gone up in 2016 by 3.4%, went up by only 2.4% in 17. Capital productivity, which had gone up by 1.1% in 2016, went up by only 0.9% in 17. And the multi-factor productivity, which had gone up by 1.9% in 2016, went up by only 1.4%. So these are figures to be watched. A last metric, this one is about a social metric. It's about, and I have taken it not from the budget, but from the household budget survey, which the minister could have quoted because after all these are some good figures. The Gini coefficient, which measures inequality of revenue, the Gini coefficient is now at 40. 4 years ago, because the survey is carried out every 4 years, 4 years ago it was 41.4. So some improvement, although gone are the days when it used to be around 35. So the inequality slightly less, but it is fair, it has to be looked after. And the households below poverty line is 9.4%, 36,000 households. And the persons in relative poverty, according to the Statistical Office, 130,500. So this is the look at all these figures. Sorry, I quoted a lot of figures. Let's now come to the last part of this presentation. It's about the comments, and I will look first at mention first the positives. Work at home. Work at home. The minister has insisted on this, and it is obviously aimed particularly at women, though it can also be said to be perhaps also for the youth, but women being too many women are just out of the labor force. So this is trying to bring them into the labor force, and facilities will be given to industries, I think, to install IT systems or things like that in houses. Obviously, they will have to meet a number of conditions, but work at home, to my mind, is a thing which goes in the right direction. I mentioned this one, ocean economy and fisheries, the geotechnical study. So there will be one carried out. One can only hope that it starts in this coming year. The emphasis on food security. Emphasis on food security. You can link that also to the development of the of the agricultural non-cane sector. This agricultural non-cane sector is not doing very well. It has to be professionalized. The planters, whether they are cane sugar or other vegetables, are complaining, not finding the right people. So it seems to me that this should be professionalized. The younger people who don't want to go there just to do what was done in the past, they must be trained, properly trained, and then they will be happy to be doing that job and share the welfare. So, and if this gives us food security, and why not also exports of niche products, so that would be a good thing. Then, of course, we have to pay tribute to what is new now, what is all over us, fintech, Bitcoin, and all the rest. So we need the knowledge, the skills on board. This is mentioned in the speech, and let us hope things are done in that field. There are taxpayers. I won't stay long on this because Gary will surely come to it. There are taxpayers who are happy because the 15% has gone down to 10%. This is said that this will be for middle class taxpayers. And management companies will be unhappy, but one can understand getting rid of the GBC2s, offshore companies. And finally, about the positives, there are various facilities for the youth, especially with regards to work. So these are positive points in the budget. The negatives are three in number. I got mentioned the debt, so I want to go back to the debt. The last two are those which are a bit controversial. The first, what I call a giveaway, reducing the price of petrol. I've studied the two press releases of the STC and compared the one of May 15 to the one of June 15. Strange to say, but petrol between in the calculation between May 15 and June 15, petrol goes up at the US at the import level. Now, they have removed in June the contribution to the equalization account. An equalization account exists in order, if the situation happens, in order not to raise fuel too much when the price goes up abroad. So there was a little contribution to the equalization account. In this particular exercise, it has been deleted. I call this a delaying tactic. They have removed the contribution levy to Maurice Info. This is of no great importance. And then they have reduced the cross-subsidy on LPG, flour and rice. It's a good thing to reduce the cross-subsidy. It would be better still to remove it totally. If government has decided to subsidize rice, flour, etc., let it be the whole amount in the budget, in the consolidated fund, not in a devious way going through the price of petrol. This one really should be out of it. It would be much more transparent and cause less misunderstanding on the part of the people. And finally, the question of the another point I wanted to mention. It's this 80% duty on imported raw sugar. While one can understand that, but it is in fact going against. It is a import substitution strategy coming up through the back door. Since the 1980s, we have an export promotion strategy, which is a good thing. It has given us results. In the 70s, we had one side by side. We had the new export strategy, but we had since the 1960s the import strategy, both working together, and the 1970s were a disaster. Let's hope we don't go back to having this import substitution strategy. But, I mean, I understand, I am not speaking for the company which is doing that. I understand that there is raw sugar imported into this country and refined here. And this refined is value added for the economy. So this is going to be much more difficult now when 80% has been imposed, levied on this sugar. Import substitution, I don't think we should go back to that sort of thing. We have to be very careful. Our strategy must remain export substitution, export promotion. And then finally, I'll come to this question of the passport and citizenship. The first country to have recourse to that was a small group of islands, St. Kitts and Nevis in the Caribbean. That was back in 1984. It's a very small state, 35,000 population. Now, of course, it's a top country, average income per head. It's gone up very much. It imposes no residency requirement, and citizenship is immediate. But now, just now, the IMF, just as we come here for Article 4 consultations every year, we go there too. And I have read their last report. They say there is a large current account deficit. Remember, I was telling you about the current account deficit for us, 5, 6, 7%. Large current account deficit, and they say what they call citizenship by investment project. The citizenship by investment project is becoming to fold up. 1984, 2018. Just to show you that this question of selling citizenship, etc., is not, it cannot be a sort of long-term sustainable thing. To my mind, the introduction of this year is a quick fix. It's a quick fix, but this is not what is going to solve our problems and get us permanently on a higher level. Some other countries which practice this are again some Caribbean, small Caribbean countries, Antigua and Barbuda, Dominica, Grenada, and by the way, their Gini coefficient inequality, Antigua 48, we are 40, Dominica 44.9, we are 40. Amongst the non-Caribbean countries doing that, of course, these Caribbean countries, for them, everything is immediate. For larger countries, and shall I say more responsible, Cyprus, 1.2 million people with a Gini coefficient better than us, 32.4. They practice, they do it less quickly. Let's put it like that. And I don't have a figure for Cyprus, but I have for Malta, which is a population about 1/3 of us, and with a good Gini coefficient compared to us, 27.9. Malta imposed a 1-year citizenship qualifying period and 6 months residency. So this is to say, looking at these various examples, that if we are going to go that way, we have to be careful and have to put conditions, serious conditions, so that there is no abuse. I am leaving aside all the questions of due diligence and these things. This is normal, but as regards the qualifying period, we have to be very careful if we are going to use this method, and keep in mind that this is not going to be the solution to our financial services sector. There are other things to be looked at, much more important. I should also, for the sake of completeness, mention Singapore, which imposes 2 years for citizenship. So there we are. I wanted to point these points to you, and we hope for the best. Thank you.
Thanks, Pierre. After all these figures, one would say the budget is very challenging. But we have to see. Let time talk to itself, and we will see. So my presentation, I have been requested to talk about the tax implication on the impact of measures announced on the offshore sector. Whether we should call it offshore is a big question. So we tend to call it the global business sector. So the positive side, unlike Pierre, I'm going to talk about the positive. So the Prime Minister mentioned that the blueprint is ready. It is on his desk, and we are looking forward to seeing the details. As you know, the devil is in the details, just like Pierre has done. Look at all the numbers and given us a big outline. So for us, it's still suspense time, but what is very comforting is the Prime Minister announced that he will be setting up a steering committee under his ministry, so under the PMO, that will look at implementation of the measures recommended by this blueprint. So, like one would say, watch the space. But the budget, I would say, because you know I come from the global business sector, we have to, I would focus more on the measures announced. As you know, the context is basically, we are under a lot of challenges globally. You all know the OECD with the BEPS action points, so this is nothing new to you, and there is a lot of pressure to, being that we have signed up to the multilateral instrument, this would mean that we have to implement certain measures, and as you know, we have already gone to adopt the principal purpose test, which is already in 21 treaties, and we are looking at having bilateral discussion to get 19 treaties to be to the BEPS standard. But over and above OECD, we have seen the EU coming up with anti-avoidance measures. They call that the ATAD, so they call that Anti-Tax Avoidance Directive, so this will put a lot of pressure on us. And the US, they call that BEAT, whether it is appropriate or not, BEAT, which is Base Erosion and Anti-Avoidance Tax, that they are going to impose on people who are looking at implementing avoidance scheme. So there are a lot of challenges ahead, and I think for us tax planners, when we are looking at putting structures in place, we have to make sure that we are sort of covering ourselves against all these anti-avoidance provisions. So coming back to the budget, so what I've done is basically I've done a couple of slides. Unlike Pierre, I don't have everything in my mind, so I will just use some slides to help me in terms of what's happening. So I will cover the global business sector, some on the domestic companies, banks, free ports, individual tax administration, as well as some amendments which is worth highlighting, which the Prime Minister announced in the annex on the Companies Act and the Financial Services Act. So, in terms of the fiscal measures, the Prime Minister announced for the global business that the abolition of the deemed foreign tax credit, which is available to companies holding Category 1 global business license, as from 31st of December 2018. So, a lot of people started panicking. What will happen next? Do we close shop? So when you analyze the abolition and the proposed measure to sort of compensate the abolition of the deemed foreign tax credit is the partial exemption regime, which says that it will give you an exemption on your income of 80% of the specified income. So what specified income it says? It says the foreign source dividends and profits attributable to foreign establishment, interest and royalties, and income from provision of specified financial services. So before we look at whether there is any impact, I think it is worth taking a small example, which I've done, is basically under the deemed tax credit method, what we used to do, I'll just take an example like royalties. What we used to do was to tax at 15%, and then we applied the deemed tax credit of 80%. So this gives you a credit of 12 to give you tax which is payable of 3. But under the partial exemption, what we do is we will exempt the income to the extent of 80%, which gives you chargeable income of 20. And then you tax it at 15%, it gives you the same result. So there is nothing to worry about. This is what I think we have had a lot of discussion with the MRA, with the Ministry of Finance, in terms of finding a solution that will keep people sort of happy. So the other measure that I think, why I didn't cover that, I should have done that first. Why did we go and eliminate the deemed foreign tax credit? So the criticism that the OECD was levying against us is how can the same activity be taxed in 3 different rates? I'll just take the example of royalty. If you're looking at a domestic company, you will be taxing that at 15%. If you're looking at a global business company, with the deemed tax credit, as we just seen, we are taxing that at 3%. But with a category 2 global business company, you tax it at 0% because the income is exempt. So if, depending on how you're going to structure, you potentially can have tax between 0 to 15%. So one way of harmonizing that is basically we eliminate the deemed tax credit and make all the companies tax at 15%. And you would see that the partial exemption on the slide, we mentioned that it is going to be granted to all companies. It is not just global business company. So if you're a domestic company or you're a global business company, you would benefit from the partial exemption. So this is in terms of who can qualify for that. I've said that all companies will be claiming the partial exemption. But if you are licensed as a global business company, then what it was mentioned in the budget is we have to satisfy predefined substantial activities. So this is something yet to be aware. So I understand that we are the Finance Act Finance Bill is currently being drafted. So when the Finance Bill comes out, we would be more in the know of what substantial activities constitute. So something that is very positive is that the existing credit system, it remains. So I would say, let's say if we have evidence of our withholding tax, we have evidence of our underlying tax. Let's say we are receiving dividends, you will tax the dividend at 15%, so there is no issue about that. But you can claim the foreign tax suffered against the 15%, and potentially you can end up with tax neutrality in Mauritius. So this is, I think, very positive that they have not removed the credit system from the foreign tax credit. We are yet to see though, but we will have to wait for the finance bill to come out. But this is what has been mentioned. What is of concern? So it talks about dividends, It talks about interest, it talks about royalties, it talks about income from provision of specified financial services. What is provision of specified financial services? I imagine here what will be exempted is if a fund manager is deriving management fees from the fund, from the collective investment scheme, then this would be covered there, and therefore, just to keep pari passu with the old regime, it would be taxed at 3%. The other thing that we can, I'm just imagining without prior knowledge, advisory fees, because this is again from the financial services, brokerage fees, custodian fees, I would think that should be included. Then what would happen is we would create that substantial activity for the financial services in Mauritius. So we would have to, like one would say, watch the space. What is not covered are things like consultancy commissions. I don't see this active income being covered there. So potentially that can have a small impact on structures that is deriving consultancy fees or commissions, and this may be subject to tax at 15%. So we would have to find ways of sort of mitigating that in the future, but let's wait for the finance bill. But this is what I'm sort of speculating will not be covered as passive income. Pierre was just mentioning about measures in terms of the Category 2 global, the elimination of the Category 2 global business license. So yes, there is a lot of concern within management companies in terms of what happens next. So what has been said, I've just tried to do it on a sort of a flow chart. So if you have a GBC2, the first question is to ask, when was it incorporated? If it was incorporated prior to 16th of October 2017, then basically, I don't know whether it's the right word, grandfathering, but I think you have a final terminal life of 30th of June 2021. So this is where your GBC1, which was incorporated prior to 16th of October 2017, will disappear. So we still have the GBC2 remaining up to that date. If it was incorporated after 2017, 16th of October 2017, then we go and say the following question. As it's set out, but we will have to wait for the finance bill. So, is it majority owned by a non-resident? If it is yes, then you ask yourself the second question, does it transact outside Mauritius? If the answer is yes, then you can go and move to the FSC to get it licensed, or you seek an authorization from an FSC, from the FSC. So if it is licensed, you will be granted a global business license. If it is only authorized and the application has gone through the domestic, through the management, through a management company, then basically you will have to apply for a domestic company. So this is where the story stops when you read at the annex to the budget in terms of the amendment. So if you read the Income Tax Act as well as the amendments to the Financial Services Act, this is where the story stops. What the minister says, what the Prime Minister says is consequential amendments will be done to the Income Tax Act. So what are the consequential amendments to the Income Tax Act? So what I am sort of, based on discussion that we have had within the industry, so if you have a domestic company, now you are left with a company which you have just incorporated, what you do with that is you would have to convert by 31st of December 2018 to decide what you want. Do you want it to have a global business license, or do you want it to keep it as a domestic company? So what do you do with the domestic company is you will have to look at the provisions of the Income Tax Act. So under the Income Tax Act, you are deemed to be tax resident in Mauritius if you're incorporated in Mauritius, or your control and management is in Mauritius. So if you want to maintain the status of the GBL2 company, and hopefully we don't see much amendments in the Section 73, then what I suggest is basically you move your control and management outside Mauritius. So by moving your control and management outside Mauritius, you are no longer tax resident in Mauritius, therefore you will not be subject to tax in Mauritius. But of course, there is a lot of caveat, especially for management companies. If you move the control and management outside Mauritius, what are the check and balances that you would put in place to ensure what is happening with the company? So of course, we will have to wait for guidance coming out from the... Of course, the question, if you move to having the company control and manage from Mauritius, then GBC2 would be taxed on its worldwide income. And if you have done that, you have set up the company to derive, let's say, commission income, which was previously exempt. Now the whole amount would be taxed at 15%. So whether the client is happy with that or not, we will have to see whether there would be an erosion of these type of companies from Mauritius. So that is in a nutshell the story about GBL1 and GBL2. Let me move a little bit on the fiscal measures now. Something like last year I was invited at the budget presentation which Madhvi kindly invited me, and I mentioned there that the 3% corporate tax on export services is a good gateway to bring harmonization. So I think the message has been heard, and the Prime Minister has announced now it is going to extend the 3% tax to global trading activities. So this is something very welcoming. So again, just to put it in context, global trading companies, very often we use that for global business company. So you buy, let's say, from China, you sell to Namibia, for example. Goods doesn't come to you. The goods go directly, but the record is in Mauritius. So a lot of people were doing that by using GBL2s, Category 2 Global Business Company, and no profit was taxed here. Or if you were doing it by way of a GBL1, using the deemed tax credit, you would end up with 3%. So by having that measure, for GBC1, we are pari passu, so there is no effect. The tax rate remains 3%. But if you were doing for GBL2s, then you will be taxed at 3% on that income. So I think it is a positive measure in the sense that it keeps people to use Mauritius as they have been using Mauritius. Other measures will be the solidarity levy on telephony service providers, which will be extended for a further 2 years. But what is interesting here, and I think it's a drafting problem. When you read the budget speech, there is some confusion as to what it wants to make. What it says here, the levy will be payable by profitable companies. The requirement for book profit of a company to exceed 5% of its turnover to be liable to the levy will be removed. So it's a sort of a drafting problem. I would think that if we're looking at if they will keep it to profitable company, then the tax rate would be 5% of the book profit. So we will have to wait for the finance bill to get more clarity on that. Other things that has been announced, I think this is at the mercy of the Mauritius Revenue Authority to stop people being creative. So before, people were using excess of foreign tax credit and offset it against CSR. Now they're going to plug the hole. So for those who are doing it, watch the space. MRA will be after you. Other thing that has come out is people who were granted tax holidays will now be required to pay CSR. So you can say you have a tax holiday, but you have the 2% to pay to the government. Other measures, I think this would be more the incentives that have been given by the government. I don't know if Pradeep is going to cover that. So, but it is more the fiscal measures in terms of the 100 farms that has been announced in the next 2 years. So these will benefit from tax holiday for the first 8 years. There would be tax holiday for people who are looking at using the special economic zone, which Mauritius have done with the Mauritius Africa Fund. So there is a 5-year tax holiday that you're looking at. Investment tax credit of 5% over 3 years will be granted in respect of expenditure on plant and machinery by a company importing in semi-knockdown form condition. That at least this is a bit on the measure that has been announced on the National Regeneration Scheme. I don't know much about that. Maybe Pradeep will cover that because it seems very technical to me. What Pierre was announcing earlier on for employers to get the ladies to work at home. So what is looking at the companies can benefit from double deduction from tax on the wage and salary costs of employees that work from home for the first 2 years. So ladies, you have to talk to your employers to tell them that would be very beneficial for you. The employers will be also eligible to an annual tax credit of 5% for the first 3 years on the required IT system. So they come and install the IT system to make it compatible with the head office. All this would be eligible for an annual tax credit of 5%. There is also the measure on tax regeneration scheme. I mentioned that 5%, but I'm not going to dwell too much in there. Pradeep is going to move on that. Measure which is of interest is on banks. So on banks, again, there is to remove the ring fencing between segment A and segment B. So there would be no distinction. So you will have a bank which is incorporated in Mauritius. So, as you know, segment B was benefiting from the deemed foreign tax credit. Therefore, the tax rate was 3%. So this would no longer be available to them, and a new regime would be a new tax regime would be available for them, whereby chargeable income of up to 1.5 billion rupees will be taxed at 5%. And any income above this will be taxed at 15%. But it also provides that if you are looking at enhancing your substance in Mauritius, you can benefit from an incentive scheme. So the incentive scheme will keep your tax rate to 5%. So what are these predefined conditions? We have to wait. I'm pretty sure that it would relate to investment banking, but this is just speculation. We will see. We'll wait for the budget. But note that the special levy on banks would be extended for an additional year. So the new rate will be applicable only as from 1st of July 2019. So the banks will still be subjected to the 10% levy on segment A and 3.4% on books profit plus 1% on operating profit for segment B. And this is very clever from the, I would say, it is a ploy of the MRA, with due respect, Mr. Hamlas. A special levy will be introduced under the VAT Act. So they want to collect the money as quickly as possible. So they will collect it under the VAT Act on the net operating income derived by banks from its domestic operation. So this was done purposely to enhance revenue collection and get it in the coffers as quickly as possible. But you have to use ploy, I don't know. Instead of getting interest-free loan from the MRA, they want the money. Other changes, I would say the TDS. TDS has been extended to commission payment. So if you're receiving commission from somebody, you will be getting less, 97%, because they will retain 3% at source. There would also be a rent paid to non-resident. This is being increased to 10%. Must be that MRA has done the calculation and have seen that the tax should be 10%, so they would collect 10% straight away. And then the taxpayer will have to complete his tax return and then claim the 10%. Then they will get either different, or they will have to issue a refund. Something that is interesting is that the TDS will not apply on director fees. Some people had gone to say that TDS is applicable. I have been that there was no prescription about the rate, so it was never implemented, and it will not be implemented. So those paying TDS, PA is looking at me, so there won't be any TDS on the director fees. but you will still be subjected to PAY. The next regime that we will be looking at is the free port sector. This is something, is that the free port there? Yeah. So, no? I've gone too quick? So free port sector, as you know, the free port was benefiting from tax exemption, so from corporate tax. This is going to be abolished. So this is a shock. This would mean that if you are going to operate from the free port, then basically you will be taxed at 15%. But of course, if you are engaged in international trading from the free port, then your tax rate will be 3%. So at least it amortizes the shock that these people would get in one go. But what is very nice of the government is they would be exempted from paying the CSR. What difference it makes. The other thing that has been mentioned is, this is a bit of a shock to me, and some of my clients would be really shocked about that, is they will not allow manufacturing in the free port sector. So we have sort of got people to come and do some processing in Mauritius to get to benefit from the SADC and COMESA duties. And now they're going to say that there's not going to be any manufacturing in the free port. So we would have to see how we're going to address that. So potentially they would have to move out of the free port. So that is the free port. The much awaited one is the individual income tax. So this is where people are happy, feel good factor. At least I think I'm happy. because I earn less than 650,000. So the tax rate moves from 15% to 10%. So I think that is going to, for people who earns 50,000 rupees monthly. So how you get that 650 is 50,000 times 13, because you have to include the mandatory bonus payment. So if you're earning 650,000 rupees, 50,000 per month, then you would have 18,000 of less tax to pay, which is wonderful. We can spend that on a new mobile phone. But of course, I would say when the Prime Minister was making the mention of the 10%, I was panicking. For you people, I said, God, I think he's going to raise it to 20%. But luckily, he has maintained the tax rate to 15%. So what is interesting is the trend. What we have seen last year is introduction of the negative income tax for the low-level people. This year, he has addressed the middle class. Next year, he will look after you. Let's look at it in a positive manner. And remember, it's election year next year. So, as for the income exemption threshold, it has increased by 5,000 across the board. So this is where I was sort of computing how does he get 18,000. So basically what he does is you take 650 minus 305, multiply by 5%, plus you benefit from the 5% at 15%, you add both of them, then you end up with the 18,000 that the person is going to save. Pierre, very bad news for you. Retired person deriving emoluments less than 50,000 will be eligible for the enhanced IET, so you don't qualify. Additional income tax deduction in respect of dependent child who's pursuing tertiary education. This is very welcome for me, but my daughter studying. So this moves from 135,000 to 200,000. But if you're studying in Mauritius, that is increased by 175,000. I think this was long overdue for people who are looking at retirement. So this is going to move by 25%. So the tax-free lump sum will move to 2.5 million rupees. I think Mario is going to retire soon as well. New measure, interest relief, which is now allowed on secured property in respect of profit charge. They don't call that interest under Islamic rules, so you call that profit charge payable under an Islamic finance arrangement for house construction. I think this was an anomaly which is being corrected to allow for interest deduction. I've done the sort of the mathematics around how you get the 18,000, so this is how you get it. I won't bore you with that. Other measures in terms of the budget for individuals is which is, I think, we have been talking about it, but nothing has been done about it, is when we have droughts. They all talk about rain harvesting. With that measure, I think this would be very positive, and this is a very good social measure. And whatever you spend on the consultancy, design, earthwork, putting the gutters, and the special tanks, you can claim this as deduction. So this is wonderful. Thank you, government. People who are very lucky, unlike me, will not be very lucky with the government. So they would be subjected to a 10% withholding tax on their winnings if they win more than 100,000. This will apply for both the lotto, government lotteries, and also from casinos. So you have to give the government 10%. No, they will retain 10% to remit to the government. In terms of the negative income tax, is that the one? Oops. Yes, so negative income tax, I think they bring more flexibility in terms of how they are going to administer it. So the threshold still remains 9,900 rupees per month, but it also allows people to work harder. So if people are doing overtime and all that, the income would be more than 9,900. So here they have mentioned that if your income is going to be up to 20,000, then you are fine. But if it is going to be your earnings is going to exceed 20,000, then you will not be eligible for the negative income tax. As well as they also cater for part-time employees. I think there has been a lot of representation on that. So if you're going to do 24 hours over at least 3 days in a week, then you are eligible for that. So that is a little bit in terms of the negative income tax. But there has been a lot of issues in you have to pay the tax before you get the NIT, so that was penalizing people. So this has been addressed by this measure, and we will have to wait for the amendments in the Income Tax Act. In terms of tax administration, watch the space, watch the space. So he now authorizes and it extends to any competent officer designated by the Director General to conduct prosecution. So before you would have to have recourse to a council, but now whoever the Director General deems to be competent can bring actions. So this is something that I'm slightly worried about, but we will have to see how these competent officers handle tax cases in the court. The other measure that I am sort of a bit not very happy is the additional money that you have to pay to the ARC to have your case heard. So if you are objecting to an assessment, you know you have to pay 10%. But if you're still not happy, you can have recourse to the ARC. But he said, fork out a further 5%. So some people are saying, but before you were paying 30%, we reduce it to 10%. What is in 15%? I think it's a bit unfair. So it's like putting fixed deposit at the coffers of the government. So I don't know whether they will maintain that, but this is what has been mentioned. In terms of, it was not there, you were required under Section 124 to provide information under the automatic exchange of information. Now, if you fail to do that, there would be penalties. So for those who have been, the MRA has sort of requested information in view of Section 124. If you have got that request, please provide the MRA, or else you would end up with penalties. Positive measure, the expeditious dispute resolution of tax scheme has been extended by a further 1 year. So if you have claims of less than 10 million rupees, you can still get resort to that scheme. I think that is very positive, being that an increased amount of assessment which is being raised by the MRA. So that's positive. And the other measure that I think this is very specific to the gambling regulatory authority. This was just to plug a loophole that was in the law. This is why it has been introduced. So I'm not going to talk too much about that. As I mentioned earlier on, in terms of administration, there is that withholding tax of 10% on all winnings of more than 100,000 rupees. HNWI, high net worth individual. So for the high net worth individual, this was introduced last year. You have to present a statement of assets and liabilities. If your income is more than 15 million or you have asset costing more than 50 million rupees. So there has been a lot of discussion. What does asset costing? I have bought that in 19 whatever it is, and the cost is that much. But MRA would say this is the valuation. There has been a lot of debate around it. But now MRA has said if the individual has filed its return for the last 5 years, they won't bother you. So you don't need to file your statement of assets and liabilities. That is very positive for a lot of the high net worth individuals. The provision on the objection and appeal. So if you are sending an amended assessment by the MRA will be reviewed, and the procedure will be set up as additional. This is something that is, I think, stand to be guided by Mr. Hanlas. I think that is a bit of a wrong measure. If they have already done the assessment, they have told you this is the tax that you have to pay. Why, when you go to objection level, they tell you, oh, you have to pay more tax? I think this is slightly wrong. So we have to slightly lobby around this. But I'm sure that it will remain, and we will be facing with additional assessment at the level of the objections unit. Other measures which have been announced is under Islamic finance, the tax exemption granted on interest income received from debentures and bonds quoted on the stock exchange will be returned to returns from Sukuks. In terms of VAT, I didn't go too much into these measures. It is more in terms of the administration of it, especially the last one is now you have to record your invoices serially rather than invoice-wise. So this is more, I think, academic. In terms of individuals, so I've talked about the statement of assets, which the individual. So if you have filed your return for the last 5 years, you don't have to submit the statement of assets. But this is something very important. If there is any suspicion of money laundering, the MRA will be empowered to detain undeclared currency exceeding 500,000 rupees on both incoming or outgoing passenger. So this gives some powers over and above the FIU. Now the MRA is getting this power. So we have to watch the space. And also the last measure that has been announced is penalty for tampering. I think this was introduced last year for VAT. But if you are going to tamper with electronic fiscal device, this can bring penalties to you. So that is in a nutshell the fiscal changes. I would like to sort of bring your attention, because a lot of people in the audience are from act as directors on companies. There are certain amendments which have been proposed to the Companies Act. Namely, if you fail to disclose an interest in a proposed transaction, then you can end up with a fine of 100,000 rupees. And, very important, and an imprisonment for a term of up to 1 year. So if you are looking at a transaction whereby you might be interested, lift your hand, say, I am interested, and let them record that in the interest register, or else you might be subjected, if the shareholders don't like you, to have problems. Other amendments, proposed amendments is if you have any major transaction that has taken place during the year, you will have to include that in your annual report. The requirement for the company to keep the share register has been extended to 7 years following the removal of a company from the register. So if you remove the company, you still have 7 years for keeping the share register. This we would have to look at the Companies Act. It talks about enhancing the protection to minority shareholders and allow for more transparency to shareholders. I think this is following for those who have done the old case Foss v. Harberton. Now we are getting there. So protection of minority shareholders, we will have to look at examining the amendments. This is more in terms of liquidation, so outstanding fees, as well as if you are getting a company to be restored, the requirement to have the company published in 2 newspapers is now being removed, is now being proposed to remove after the Finance Act will be better. In terms of the Financial Services Act, like mentioned earlier on, so you will cease to have GBL2s as from 1st of January 2019. And all GBL1 companies would be named as Global Business License companies. So you will not have this Category 1 and Category 2. So you will have only one type, which is the Global Business License company. Something that is very important, the FSC is now given power to give direction to any person as may be required to ensure compliance with licensing conditions. They are also empowered to take action against a licensee which fails to comply with Section 52 and 52A of the Banking Act. But when I go on to look in the Banking Act, I don't see a 52A. I think it's a drafting error somewhere. The power to appoint an administrator, like what we say now, you have the FSC can license you or can authorize a company. So if your authorization has been withdrawn, the FSC has the power to appoint an administrator. The other measures which have been announced is licensing maintain the requirement for to be granting a license all times, and extends the scope of offense in respect of providing false and misleading information. Don't get in the trap of your client, I would say. Evaluate the information before you give it to the FSC, or else you will end up into trouble. They have extended the scope whereby if you destroy, falsifies, conceals or disposes of information, you will be in trouble. Positive thing, there would be two new licenses which have been set up. One is the custodian services and the digital asset marketplace. I think this would be more in what Pierre was mentioning earlier on in terms of the fintech initiative. So this would be in light with this new provision. And then it also is going to, has announced to compliance services and global shared services. If you're going to provide these services, this would be under new licenses. Let's watch the space. So with that, I think I conclude my presentation. I'll pass to Pradeep, who will take you through the business facilitation measures.
Ladies and gentlemen, good evening. I take note of the time, and I know that we had a long day for the majority among us. Thank you, Maddi, ACCA Mauritius, for giving Business Mauritius, and particularly me, the opportunity to share my thoughts on the budget. Much has been said lately, Many people in several quarters, they have analyzed the measures. We are still in the process of looking at the fine print, the details. I also acknowledge the wealth of information given by our two eminent resource persons. For me, it will be, I'll try to address those issues which link to businesses, whereby businesses will be directly involved. And I will pick up a few points which I am in agreement with Pierre and Gary, and some other points whereby I'm not in much agreement also. Much has been said regarding the budget, what has been written, the black letter law approach, but we need also to look in between the lines. There are many unfinished business, there are many issues, all decisions which were being awaited and which we don't find in the budget. It doesn't mean the end of the world. Maybe these issues will be taken up a bit later. But why I'm highlighting these, I will be highlighting these issues because they form part of our budget memorandum. First things first. For businesses to thrive, for the economy to grow, we need business facilitation. And what businesses require is what we call a conducive environment. Let us see now what are the hallmarks of a conducive business environment. There is certainty in the law, there is predictability, there is functioning of institutions, there is, I say, a vibrant judiciary, and there is governance. There are many other criteria, but we will be measuring some of the proposals in the budget against this backdrop to see whether we have certainty, we have predictability, whether the institutions are empowered to deliver, and then we will make a sort of assessment. There are many good proposals in the budget. I'll start the first one. Firms need certainty, needs visibility when it comes to what would be their cost. And there are many costs, operating costs, but I'll be looking at the issue of labor. People. You will find in the budget that there is a gamut of measures regarding employment, addressing the issue of youth employment, and also you will find at a later stage in the 6th or 7th pathway about how do we increase the labor participation rate. For our economy to grow, there are not many miracles. More people should be involved in economic activity, should be engaged in economic activities. We believe that for a country like Mauritius, we don't have the activity rate which our peers have. Therefore, when you look at the measures regarding youth employment or curbing, addressing the issue of youth unemployment, what do we find? We find that there are many schemes. Some of the schemes, they have existed, they have been revisited, and we find also a new component which is the youth service program, whereby in the existing programs you will find a component of life skills, soft skills. Why this was important? And we support this because what we have seen on the ground as evidence, many youngsters, they join these schemes and they shop around and eventually they don't terminate this program and then they go back again on the registers as unemployed. What is missing? These schemes, we welcome them. They will promote it is stated in the budget that the objective is to promote employability and build the competences of the youth for them to face the reality of the world of work. But what is missing for sure is that we don't have, and we at the level of Business Mauritius, we are firm advocate that we need to have a proper monitoring system. Currently, there are so many multiple entry and exit in these training programs. Youngsters can join, can enroll a program, leave, and can go in another program because they are volatile. What is lacking is the National Employment Service. We need to update the database. We need to have one single register of unemployed or job seekers in Mauritius. Currently, the Ministry of Labour, the Employment Division, has a register, and we all know this, ce qu'on appelle Bureau de l'Emploi, Bureau de Chômeur. People go and register over there, and you will be surprised to know that people can register over there, can eventually join employment, but the name will still remain over there, it won't be struck out. People entering in many schemes, in the YEP program, in NSDP, it's so many schemes, and still their names still remain over there. Therefore, the first issue is we need to have a sort of an assise de l'emploi. Who is an unemployed in Mauritius? Because the first big bold measure is we are targeting 14,000 youth. The budget allocated is 1 billion rupees to improve the employability skills. We don't want business as usual. There's training programs there, and when we look at the results, we still find that you just have to listen to the radio. So many people telling you, giving testimonies that our children are still looking for jobs, they're not getting employment opportunities. Yes, it's a problem, but also that we are not addressing the issue correctly. Therefore, we need proper profiling of who is an unemployed in Mauritius. Therefore, then these schemes will be beneficial. The next issue I wanted to raise was the issue of, yes, promoting women in the world of work. And there is over here also a series of measures whereby these will act as sort of incentives for firms, for example, to create employment opportunities for women. And one measure which needs to be shared with you is this measure regarding maternity leave, 14 weeks maternity leave, which will be now paid for women who are reckoning less than 12-month continuous employment. Basically, it means to say that if a woman goes on maternity leave before completing 1 year of employment, as the law is currently, the maternity leave will be without pay, without salary. Now, with this amendment, the maternity leave will be with pay. Now, whilst we agree that, yes, not because you are on maternity leave that you should not derive any income or support or remuneration, while we accept this proposal, this initiative, we believe that we are putting burden on enterprises. This can be a sort of deterrent for many firms to recruit, namely SMEs, to recruit women, on the fear that if the lady goes on maternity leave, I'll have to pay. 14 weeks for big firms, it's not a big deal. But for many SMEs, somebody being out of the labor market, out of the enterprise, and you still have to support 14 weeks remuneration for certain small enterprises, I think it can be problematic. But I know that many firms, before this amendment, they have already been practicing this custom of paying paid maternity leave even if the lady had not completed 12-month continuous service. Now I think the middle of the road approach over here would be that, and we have funds which have accumulated, and these funds are employers' money. By the way, in the workfare program, there is currently 4.7 billion rupees, which as from 2009, employers have been contributing. And I think we, Business Mauritius, we will make a plea to government that at least for this payment of maternity leave, which we welcome, I think the burden should not be on employers. There can be a refund. If employers pay this amount also, there can be a refund from the workfare program. Now, Pierre and Gary hinted about the issue of home working. Yes, this is a very good initiative, a good measure, and hopefully this can also encourage. But this is not limited only to women. This is not only limited to women. It is for men and women. Now, I think by now we can understand if it is home working, working with devices, internet connectivity, there is a certain profile of jobs which will be more concerned with home working. Right? Where in firms where you have client-facing roles, where you have to deal directly with clients, that there are certain positions I think won't be able to benefit from home working. But the good thing is that in many enterprises, in many sectors now, this opportunity for you to envisage home working is a reality. And there will be certain incentives given to firms. And over here, the word of caution is, today the trend is flexible working practices. If you take as starting point 9 to 4 jobs with one employer, with one remuneration, with one working time, and then you put home working as a subset of it, I think maybe we are getting a bit wrong over here. This is where, when we will be discussing with the authorities, our position would be that home working is an animal in itself. This is what we call flexible working practices. Home working can happen two ways. You have somebody already in employment today and now wants to work at home, and there is the scheme, and the employer allows the permission for the person to work at home, makes investment in the equipment, will get the benefits and the incentives. This is one category. And we need to reconcile fundamentals over here. But the next chunk of home working, and this is, I think, what the budget addresses, because we're talking about new jobs, new activities, new opportunities, is somebody who currently is not in employment, but who from home wants to work as a liberal person in a liberal profession or engage in an economic activity. Now, when we are addressing this segment, where do you benchmark yourself? Because this is somebody, this is a category of person who has not been working in formal businesses, wants to work from home, and the regime should be very flexible. Because if you start with local leave, sick leave, overtime, and you overburden it with different things, home working can be a no-go. Because what would be the use of having home working, whereby we are not having, for certain enterprises, control over the working time and the output and the productivity. Therefore, that's why a bit of flexibility in home working, and we should be inspired of what is happening elsewhere. Home working also works with freelancing. Freelancing, it's an act of faith, it's a choice. Freelancing basically means somebody wants to engage in an activity on his own. This question of a unified workplace, a unified working remuneration, a unified remuneration, working time also, this is something, yes, it has existed, it is still of use, but more and more, it's no more the model against which we need to benchmark ourselves. We need to have flexible working practices. This is an attempt, I need to admit, it is an attempt to modernize our labor market. But if we want to bring new ideas, new opportunities, and we wear the lens of an old model, we will have difficulties. Other issues would be when we look at both speakers, they have talked about many institutions, but I think I will shed light on one very important institution which over the years will play a very important role in how we formulate our economic and social policies. It's the EDB. EDB, under what is being proposed, is becoming the sort of think tank whereby there will be strategic thinking. Let us see, I'll share with you what EDB will attempt to do. It will be the single licensing agency for permits and licenses. This is a very important measure. Now, at the end of the day, il nous faudra poser la question whether the means, the resources, and all these facilities will be given for these things to realize. But EDB will re-engineer business processes of ministries. Therefore, this wind of change. You will recall 2 years ago, there was a series of institutions in the civil service whereby the Minister of Finance had said that there will be a restructuring of the civil service. Why I am raising the civil service with this fraternity of accountants and professionals? Businesses, we interact with the authorities, and our focal point is many ministries, different ministries, and for those among you or your clients for whom you work, there are many stories we can tell, we can share about how the service we get from certain ministries in terms of processing of files, in terms of processing of licenses and permits. Therefore, and this is very important, how long it will take, how powerful the civil service unions will be, whether they will be an agent of change, they will be involved in the process or not, this remains unanswered right now. Mais c'est très très important that EDB is given this mandate. There is also an amendment you will find in the Finance and Audit Act. The comments of the Director of Audit regarding what happens at the level of ministries, regarding of use of funds, management of projects, and how public funds have been used. And the terms which have been used in the budget is accountability and transparency. Henceforth, with this amendment, ministries will have to come with a sort of report. How do they intend to bring changes and to amend their functioning in light of observations of the Director of Audit? We see also a large chunk in the budget regarding digitalization of civil service. You will find on many occasions a steering committee set up at the level of PMO, a working group, a council, so many institutions. Well, it's okay, this is the way how the civil service works, and I think the more the merrier. But these things are very important for the private sector. These things are very important for firms, because firms will be making decisions regarding investment. And if we don't have a vibrant, conducive, efficient civil service, there will be bottlenecks. Therefore, these proposals, these measures, we welcome. Now, let me look at, for example, the opportunities for private investment. I think these things, a new growth pool is being envisaged: artificial intelligence, blockchain, fintech. There will be setting up of a steering committee, a council, and on these issues, I think I will strongly recommend the association to take position on these issues. These things are not limited only to one business association or one sectoral association. I think on these issues, everybody est logé à la même enseigne là. Our level of knowledge on these issues, everybody is at par. And I think if there are certain best practices, there are certain ideas that you need to share, because all these issues, we are looking at the future of work. It's also about working in the future. How technology tomorrow is going to affect our businesses and our operations, and also the work that our people are doing. Therefore, it's very important that we have a sort of position on this, and we are not. Je ne vous dis pas que we will be dictated by government, but I think on many of these issues, government or certain institutions may have a sort of a very myopic view. And we, at the level of the private sector, you as representatives and professionals representing businesses, I think you have your say on these issues. Now, when we look at the emphasis which has been laid on the production of, for example, food crops, sheltered farming, agripreneurs, DBM and MOBEC, which will be providing loans and a series of measures, we welcome these measures. This is a very strong support that we are going to give to businesses, and you will also find that there is DBM will also provide non-financial support, hand-holding and mentoring cell. The only difficulty, I measure my words, the only difficulty we have over here is that too much emphasis, too much powers is being given on DBM, Development Bank of Mauritius. And we know, sans jeu de mots, the track record of DBM en réalité, in what is written in the statute book, and in reality, le parcours du combattant of the ordinary, normal entrepreneur. And I think, but in between the lines, vous allez voir que EDB also will have a monitoring role to play. Therefore, let us only rely that EDB will be there avec le petit fouet and the whip to make these institutions work. Je n'ai rien contre les institutions, surtout les institutions du gouvernement, but the thing is that in the narrative which I have shared with you up to now, vous allez voir que business people, we take our responsibility to the extent that we need to have a supportive civil service and institutional framework. It makes 2 to 10, because over here this enabling business environment that I'm advocating, c'est pas seulement les entrepreneurs, les entreprises. It's also a responsible government and responsible institutions. And we have the issue of, it's not an issue, there is much emphasis on building infrastructure, transport, road decongestion program. There is also at the level for and this is very important, for textiles, and not only for textiles, for exports. Can you imagine that this year our port remained inactive for 24 days since the beginning of the year? It's because we don't have those amenities which will allow big vessels to be here during movie time. Therefore, this issue of breakwater, funds have now been allocated, and I think il y a une volonté brise-lames for construction of this breakwater, and this, I think, it's a very good initiative. In the same vein, we have the fishing port and the cruise terminal building. We welcome these measures. On securing sustainable development, vous allez voir que the government has now acted, c'est-à-dire will provide money, 2 billion rupees on the National Environment Fund, which was there since 2002. Rien n'a été fait, and let's hope that they are going to now look at this issue. Quoique we have a reserve on the energy component, which maybe I will take a bit later. Alors, je ne vais pas, other issues which I had have already been taken by our two friends, and I can only concur with them. Maintenant, after all these niceties, il y a aussi les sous-entendus, les ratés, les non-dits, les demi-vérités, and these omissions. Let us look at a few of these omissions. I think when I was referring to the issue of governance, and I think the population, this is not a budget thing. Mes détracteurs pourront me dire, it's okay, not addressed in the budget, it will be taken care of a bit later. But I think when we are looking at a sort of roadmap, whether the budget time in Mauritius is really something very important, because thanks to the media, our friends from the media, they create a sort of big event happening, everything is boiled down to what is going to happen in the budget. That's very good, participation of everybody. Alors, over here, budget means also that you give a sort of roadmap, you give a sort of vision, and you give yourself the means to look at those acute issues, burning issues. Because at the end of the day, if I bring it down to businesses, what businesses need? Certainty. They need predictability. They need to know that the affairs of the country are in safe hands. There will be a sort of visibility. So we can invest. So we can take risk. This is the simple model of the free enterprise market system. Now, where we don't have visibility is on the financing of political parties. Because we say this would have been a very strong measure. Financing of political parties, registration of political parties as entities. So financing would be very transparent. This is an issue where Business Mauritius, I think, we need, and it's not a controversial issue. I think we need just to agree as a nation, and for also stakeholders, and business is one stakeholder, because what has not been said, that enterprises finance political parties, that business leaders indulge in these practices. We are not giving any lessons to anybody. But just like any other institution in a democratic society is registered, is licensed, is transparent, is accountable, I think on the issue of financing of political parties, I think on pouvait mieux faire. Nothing has been said, but I think we are awaiting bold decisions. On the issue of aging population, and over here, I think I can understand the état d'âme of Pierre if you will try to respond to it, because until recently, Pierre, myself, and a few friends were representing the private sector in a high-level pensions committee, and je suis pas en train de donner un scoop, rien, and looking at the level and quality of the debate over there et les ratages qu'on a eus, Pierre avait soumis sa démission bien avant. He left the committee, he went away, and I stayed over there. The committee for a year never met, and we just met recently to take note of what we have done, and the committee was disbanded. Pour vous dire que aging population, it's an issue. It's an issue. It's a societal issue. And I think these are the bold things that I think we need as a nation. We need to start talking about. On this issue, for us, our position is as follows. It's unfinished business. A few years ago, we extended the retirement age. We have reached a new retirement age, which is not new, it is the retirement age. Now, there are certain incongruencies, there are certain dysfunctions. And I think if si on fait un tour de, je sais pas dire table, un tour de salle over here, I think the majority among us will agree on this. You would have somebody having reached the age of 60, still working, still drawing his salary, and at the same time, he's getting the basic retirement pension. That person will get the basic retirement pension when he retires. We can make a difference. We can make a difference with somebody else qui n'a jamais travaillé. Elle, cette personne-là, arrivée à 60 ans, pour elle, on va payer le BRP. It's not a problem, because this person doesn't have to wait, has never worked. Now, small things like this, if we send the right signal. And these are the things, for example, on the budget, which is a time whereby there is many measures, a mix of measures. On aurait pu venir with certain old measures. This is for us still unfinished business. Rien n'a été dit là-dessus. On the issue of CSR, Gary, je crois, vous a partagé beaucoup de choses in terms of tips. When you pay CSR, when you don't pay, qu'est-ce qu'il faut faire? Bon, en CSR, the architecture, the écosystème qui a été mis en place. Je crois que nous avons des craintes que looking forward, it may be jeopardized. Let me explain myself. On n'est pas contre CSR. CSR by essence is voluntary. Okay, we have gone a bit further. We have made it become statutory in Mauritius. There is a law for CSR. Tout en rappelant que CSR, or by other names, some will call it philanthropy, some will call it welfare, some will call it other things. Mais CSR a toujours été pratiqué par les entreprises. Many enterprises have devoted their good faith in looking at societal issues, at supporting NGOs, associations, the wider community where they were operating. Quand CSR est venu, and then there was a framework, there were guidelines, we supported the things. Then at a certain point in time, the MRA, we had to remit 50% to the MRA, and then on the other 50%, we could still engage in community-based programs. And then at a certain point in time, we had to remit 50% to the MRA, and then on the other 50%, we could still engage in community-based programs. Et là aussi, pas n'importe quel programme, according to the guidelines in certain national priorities. And this is very important for you to understand, because this 50% that we spend on these projects, these are long-term projects. We work with NGOs, with associations, and these associations need to have visibility, whether the projects, because in CSR, many of these projects, these are not one-off projects. Quand vous êtes en train de travailler sur l'éradication de social evil, sin or difficulty, and you will have to work with communities, il y a un engagement qui se fait dans le temps. Now, the difficulty we foresee is that, and to make all these things happen, many fondations have been put in place. And les fondations sont quoi? Les fondations sont des special purpose vehicles, whereby tout est bien organisé, and many among you, you are engaged in preparing the accounts or in auditing the accounts of these fondations, et vous allez savoir que what they need is, they need a bit of visibility. Now, with this measure now of 75% going over there, slowly but surely, this will have an impact on tout cet écosystème qui a été mis en place, whereby enterprises were working with NGOs, with the local community, and support were being given to the needy and vulnerable. Let us hope that the National CSR Foundation will do things in a better way. But on this issue, this is really a setback for businesses, and surtout for those foundations who have invested on these issues.